I'm Victoria. I'm Vanessa. Yeah, it's okay if you can't tell us apart. I guess we would call it Twingineering. Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back
Welcome back.
to our 33rd episode of Twingineering. If you're new here, we started this podcast to be a resource for Latinas and other minorities in engineering. Um, and
By providing our advice, our knowledge, testimonies, but also bring on um, some guests also experience in the engineering world. Today we do not have a guest, so thumbs down for that. But we are going to be talking about something pretty cool, I think. We're going to be going into interview questions. This will be a part of our interview questions series. Um, so
so
if you're new to like the interview process or even just want to freshen up, then this is for you. Vanessa, were you gonna say something?
I was gonna say thumbs up to that. Okay.
So we get a
Say
thumbs
something else.
down and a thumbs up. Cool. Um, but before we do that, we'll start off with some weekly highs and lows just to get the conversation flowing. Get our stutters out.
Right.
But yeah. So I guess I'll start off. We'll start off with the lows and then go into the highs. My weekly low would probably be taxes, insurance, and just other big girl life things that have been coming up. I feel like I get one thing in the mail and then I figure that one out. And then I get another thing in the mail and then I stress out again. And that's what it's been this month. So yeah.
Well, at least the month is over. We're in a new one. But yeah, I would
New
say
obstacles.
my weekly low is pretty much the same thing. Just a lot to do, so little time. Taxes is one thing. I gotta figure that out. I hate it. Yeah, yeah. So let's bring up the energy.
We'll go into the weekly highs now.
hmm
Um, I would last week I visited friends in Davis, so drove up, visited some friends, got to do that. Basically got a break from life over here. So yeah.
Well, why are we the same? I also visited friends last week, not in Davis though. In Indiana. Shout out Adam and Jenny for letting me stay at their apartment. Yeah, I hadn't seen them in a while since they moved, so it was nice to just catch up and not deal with my responsibilities here for a bit. So it was cute. I would do it again.
This is to Adam and Jenny. Vanessa would do it again. Cool.
Thank you.
Um, okay, so now we'll go into the interview questions part of this episode. So today we're going to be talking about specifically behavioral and like skills questions. We'll do more episodes where we talk about like more technical questions, questions to ask. But today we'll do behavioral questions. For some questions, we're just gonna list, and others we're gonna kind of talk about how to answer. Um, it just depends on what we have prepared. And then, of course, if you guys have any follow-up questions, feel free to DM us. Like we'll talk about it in the next episode. But yeah, let's get into it. So we do have about 12 questions. We'll see how much time we have. But the first one is the most famous one, I would say. Tell us about yourself, right?
Yeah.
And if you're like me and you don't prepare for something like this, you go blank. And
Right.
you start to just ramble about nothing. Um, so I do have like what an example. it was basically the one that I had like right after college. So this would obviously be very different now for me, but I'll just read it out loud and then you can either take it as a template. I mean, obviously, like change stuff wherever you see fit. But yeah, Vanessa, did you have anything to say before or?
No, I could just talk after.
Okay. So here's my example. So if they say, tell us about yourself, and you're like enthusiastic, right? Sure, like of course, I'd love to. My name is Name, and I recently graduated with a bachelor's degree in major at UC Davis. I was formerly a lab assistant for the electrical and computer engineering department at my university, where I tested lab equipment in the labs and helped with any other tests or experiments the department may be running, such as the Corsi Rosenthal boxes. And then obviously you can go into this a little later. This work is very independent, and while I do enjoy working on my own and applying my knowledge to ensure the quality of lab equipment, I love the opportunity to work on a team outside of school-related projects and dive deeper into the process of whatever engineering job role that you're applying to. So, couple of things going on here. Obviously, you want to introduce yourself, kind of talk about something like your most recent role. Um, Either that may be like where you're currently at or where you just left, like your previous role. And talk about a little about what your role was there, like a few projects that you think would stand out, but don't go too much into detail. This is like a pitch for yourself, and you don't want the interviewer to fall asleep, right? Like you don't want to go too deep, but give a brief overview of yourself, that gives an understanding of where you were and what you did and like what you want to do, um, moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, like Victoria said, you do want to keep this part or your response pretty short and sweet. Um, a few seconds at most, like definitely not a whole minute. That's too long. Um, I would also suggest like based on the role that you're applying to, try to mention something that is related to it as far as like your experience. Like Victoria said, for example, like she was a lab assistant and she tested one thing, blah blah blah, right? Which is directly applicable, I would say, to the role that she was applying. um you don't want to be like, oh, I was born in
You're right.
99
When
and
I
I
was 10 years
discovered my
old.
interest for engineering. Like, it's not the time to talk about your life story. You do want to get your point across of, your experience and what you're interested in. Um, and yeah, um, that one is very, very short. Then, they'll obviously ask you about your experience later in the interview, so don't feel the need to explain it all in that one question.
Yeah, and I would say that if your previous roles like have nothing to do with this, you can definitely bring up like a skill that would be applicable. Um, and you can kind of pivot and say like you did this, but like you are very much interested in moving towards like something different, such as what the role you are applying to is.
Yeah,
I don't know if I said that right, but yeah.
yeah. I guess just to quickly add on, like one thing is like engineering, let's say you don't have a lot of like experience, like hands-on, you could definitely talk about like the problem solving mindset and how you learned how to problem solve, and how you would be willing to, tackle problems in your future role.
Right. Okay, so I think that's enough about that one. Um, Hopefully these other explanations are a little bit quicker. But the next question I have on here is what is an ideal job? So sometimes they'll ask you like what you're looking for in a role, a job, a company. Um and you can kind of this is kind of up to you. I guess one thing I would mention is like a work-life balance, but that's just me. Um, and it just depends. Maybe it's I don't know, like a job where you can travel more, or maybe you want to do more research. Um, yeah, I think that's all I'll say for that. It's kind of up to you, and what you want to do in your next role.
Yeah.
Anything to add for this?
Well, I was gonna say, like I guess just keep that in mind with any role that you're interviewing for. Like,
Oh,
what's
yeah.
one thing that you want out of this role? Um, Aside, like if you're like, oh, I really want the technical experience, emphasize that. If you're like Victoria said, a work-life balance, emphasize that. So just keep that in mind when you're going into the interview as well.
hmm Okay, next question. What's a situation where you had to problem solve? Um, for this one, also up for not for interpretation, but like it just depends on your experience. Because this is more behavioral, I would say you can take a more life experience or maybe like extracurricular activities experience. You can also use like a project experience. But yeah, I think also I would say this early on, keep like what is it? Like a little like bank of experiences and ideas that you can kind of refer to. Even for multiple questions, I think a specific experience can be applied multiple times. Just so you're not like trying to think during the interview. Like you have these ideas in the back of your mind that you're going to be like putting out or applying these questions to. So this would be like one of those times.
Yeah. Um, a lot of these behavioral questions, I would say also, if you have no idea how to structure your answer, one common method is the STAR method. So that's like situation, task, action, and result, right? So like what is the situation? Identify it. Um, what is the task that needed to be completed? What activities did you actually do? And then what was the result? Because you want to make sure you're addressing the question and not just rambling. Um, because I remember one time, just a quick story, like someone was helping me, like a mentor was helping me do this, right? And one of the questions that she asked me was, tell me about a time, right, where you had to solve a problem. And then I was like rambling, and at the end of it, she's like, okay, do you feel like you answered the question?
Love
I was like,
her.
you know what? You're right. I didn't. So I think having a structure will give you like these 4 points that you have to mention. So you keep that in the back of your mind and you know you're gonna address the question rather than just like ramble. So yeah, that's another tip.
Okay, so the next question is at company, right? We like to hire those who are natural leaders. When have you taken on a leadership task in the workplace without being asked?
Mm.
So, if you've had a previous position, this would be the time to talk about that. But let's say you're coming out of college, then I would say talk about your leadership experience within um like organizations, um like maybe it's group projects, like a time that you took initiative or I mean that's basically what they're asking, right? Without being asked. So think about a time where you decided to take initiative. Um, Even if you didn't have a designated like leadership position, like when did you decide to take on that position of a leader, right? I think that's what they'd be looking for in this case.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that was pretty well said. I wouldn't
Okay.
add anything.
Okay. What skills did you learn in your last position that will help you in this new role with company?
Mm.
Um, so again, learn about the role that you are applying to. Don't just be like, I'm gonna apply to all these roles and see which one I get. Like, you need to know what they do, research them a little bit, like what are your responsibilities, like what could be your potential like everyday tasks. Because I think different like engineering roles are very different, or they can be very different. So some things that I have listed here are like effective leadership, um, public speaking and presentations, right? So if you're doing like a lot of, I don't know, test, research, presenting data, like that would be something good. Um, some other skills that you can mention are any software technology that you're familiar with. Um, briefly mention, I wouldn't say go into like detail of each one, but they'll probably ask you about that if they're interested in that. Um, let me see. Um, you can talk about like your experience with how you either work like individually or in teams. Um, what experience, let's say you're just coming out of college, like what experiences you have in college that would prepare you for this position. So like I think leadership was one thing for me. But if you don't know, Vanessa and I co-founded an organization, um, along with Veronica, if you're listening, um, called Coffee at UC Davis, and I think we did a lot for that organization. So a lot of the skills, like communication skills, like fundraising, being organized with everything that we had to do, um, presenting our mission statement and like in front of events, professors, outreach, um, speaking with potential donors, things like that that would benefit the company that you're applying to in some way. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I also added like problem solving. I know I already mentioned that earlier, but for like an engineering role specifically, that's like a big mindset thing. So it can be used like generally, and if you don't have like all the technical skills that, for example, like if the application shows that, I don't know, you need to know how to do CAD or use specific softwares. Like if you don't have um those like listed out specifically, you can also talk about, like Victoria was saying, like leadership, and then like I'm mentioning problem solving, how you would go about that. I know you mentioned like at the beginning of when you were answering the question how um don't just like select all these positions, and I think you should apply with intention, um to roles. I know sometimes you're kind of just like, oh, I'm gonna apply to these random, general positions. But then if you do get an interview, that's when you kind of have to really focus and do your research on the company. So just backing off that, but yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, I'll just repeat the question. Why do you want to work at a company and why do you want to apply to this role? So a couple things here. Learn about the company and how it aligns with your values and goals. Definitely highlighting those points, like will show how you align with the company, or like for that role. So I think that's super important. Um, let's see. Oh, and then also like highlighting in a different, I guess, definition, like those points for you, right? So saying, for example, let's say you're applying to a company that offers a rotation program, say how that will help you or highlight how that will benefit you. Like maybe they'll help you grow. Whether that's rotational programs, you prefer hands-on experience and that's what they're offering. You like when things are always changing, and that's something that the company is known for. Or even in just in this role. Um, learn about the position that you're interested in and what kinds of tasks they'd be tackling or skills you need for this role. Another thing I would say is building connections, or even like an informal coffee chat with someone who holds a similar role would be beneficial just to learn about the kinds of like tasks or skills that you would potentially need. I think is something worth going after. So like, I don't know, if there's somebody on LinkedIn, if you have someone in your friend group who has a similar position, I would say definitely reach out. Be reasonable. People have their own lives, people have their own boundaries, but like informal coffee chats, I think are super beneficial also.
Yeah. I don't think I have anything else to add.
Okay. The next question, what separates you from others? So this is where, I mean, in all these questions, you do have to talk about yourself and you have to be comfortable with like bragging about yourself. Um, I guess a couple things that I listed are taking initiative to, um, like outside of what I had to learn in my college experience. Also, this is all like back related to college stuff, so obviously this would be different now, but like outside of the courses that I was taking, I did decide to attend like different trainings. Like Vanessa and I did a training on like 3D printing and soldering, even when it wasn't required. We just didn't know like how to do either of those things, and we thought that we like needed to know them before like starting school or something. And so we wanted to get trained in them. And so we did. So that's one thing. Another thing is, or I mentioned, was my willingness to learn and take on new experiences. Um, I mentioned that I was first generation studying electrical engineering and found that I needed to put in a little more work than others. And, that can be seen as like something negative, but use that to your advantage, right? Like you were placed here with so many obstacles, and yet you're still achieving like all of these things. Um, so let's see what else I said. Throughout my college career, I have placed myself in positions to learn more about the subjects I don't already know more about. I mentioned those trainings. Um, and also like learning how to use a laser cutter. Um, basically putting in the time for what I knew I needed to learn these topics, right? It wasn't just like what was required of me and taking that extra step. Um, and obviously I have proof of that, right? That's what I did my whole college career. So yeah, I think that's what I'll say about that.
I would also say like things you should stay away from when answering that question, like what separates you from others is like I'm a hard worker. Because everyone will say that. And I think it's better to you can reword that by like giving maybe like one specific example and like how you demonstrated that, right?
Hmm.
Um, or like Victoria said, like taking initiative, right? Like in a way that kind of shows that as well. Um, and yeah, I mean, what else? Um, yeah, I
I'll
guess.
add I'll add that you can also talk about like extracurriculars and how that like helps you or separates you from others. And how like those skills can help you here in this role, or in engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next question is talk about a time you've taken on a leadership role and how you dealt with conflicts within the team. So, definitely pull from those traumatic group project experiences. And I hope that you're able to deal with the conflict within the team, because now would be the time to use that or to talk about that. Yeah, I guess that's all I'll say about that. I didn't write like a personal experience for this one, but
Yeah, I mean, I guess for that you can also talk about like you want to emphasize what you did to
oh yeah.
um like minimize or like remove that conflict, and how that conflict was resolved. You don't want to say, "Oh yeah, we just all ended up not being friends anymore." You know what I mean? Like that just shows maybe you didn't handle that very well.
Yeah,
Or how, you went about it, even if, the result wasn't the best, but you did what you could in a way.
right.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah.
let's say like the team was falling apart, but you stepped up and you're like, okay, like maybe we won't finish in time, or like maybe the project won't work completely, but like what are the steps we need to take to move forward, um, to like complete something, right? And to kind of rebuild that team um relationship. Like I think that would be a perfect example if you have something similar to that. The next question would be describe a time you missed a deadline. So, obviously, these questions are harder, right? Because you don't want to seem like a terrible candidate for doing things like, failing, missing a deadline, um, right? You want to be perfect, but you will probably be asked this question, maybe. And you need to know how to answer it and talk about like how you dealt with it.
You also don't want to lie and be like, I've never missed a deadline.
Oh, yeah.
Like, like, okay, I'm sure, you forgot to pay something one time. Maybe it's not school related. But I mean, ideally you want it to be, something like in school, like maybe you missed a discussion or an assignment. You want to talk about how you went about it. Ideally you don't want to say, oh, I just skipped it, whatever, it wasn't worth my time. You want to say how you still put in like some effort, um, or, maybe the odds were just against you, and you ended up missing it, but you still put in the work because you saw the value in whatever was being given to you. Um, you're not, oh, wait, you're not perfect, so don't act like you are, and that's okay. Um,
Yeah. Um, Another thing or another way to answer this is like if it's work related, like if you miss a deadline and this was customer related, like how did you go about like telling that to the customer? Like obviously you want to be 100% honest with them. Um, how did you like let them know? What were the steps that you took moving forward? Um, like what was their response and like how you dealt with that, right? And I think that's the most important thing is how you deal with conflict, challenges, missing a deadline, right? They're not good things to deal with. Like you don't want to deal with them. But I think the important thing is, how you do deal with them and how you tackle them. And I think that's the main thing that they're looking for. So,
um, I would also say you can also identify a countermeasure for the future, like
oh yeah,
how would it not happen again? Like, oh, I figured out how to manage my time, or um, I figured out how to do this, and that would help me, not miss a deadline again in the future.
right.
So you're not only thinking about like this one like forward, but also how you're gonna prevent that from happening in the future.
So the next one would be describe a time you overcame a challenge, and this can be in like technical or non-technical. Um, Similar to like other questions. Like maybe your challenge was learning how to navigate college or something. How did you deal with that? Um, I don't know, starting an organization, right? Um, or maybe it's a technical issue. Like, how did you, like, maybe you never knew how to read a schematic or something. Like, what did you do to overcome that challenge? Maybe it was a life challenge, and then talk about that and how you overcame that. This is definitely like it's based on your experience, so I'll end with that.
I would just reiterate that you want to focus on what you did. If you're gonna talk about like maybe something you overcame a challenge, like in a group setting, don't say we. Like, oh, this is what we did. Like,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
as a group, they don't care. They want to understand what you did specifically to overcome the challenge.
hmm And then also similar to like the last two questions, describe a time where you excelled and a time where you know you underachieved. So I would say apply kind of what we talked about in the last two questions to this question and make sure you have like those experiences in the back of your mind or like in your little box of ideas of what to bring up. And then the last question we have here is why did you decide to become an engineer? So this is a time where you would talk about, your inspiration, um, why engineering interests you. Obviously, don't ramble on forever, but talk about like what made you passionate about it or why are you continuing to study it. And don't say like my parents did it, so I did it. Okay, like I mean, I can't say that my parents did not do that, but you know, I feel like be passionate about it a little bit.
Yeah, like you want to talk about like that initial spark and like what made you want to continue. Um, they want to know that they have or like they want to hire passionate people who are going to be good to work with, not like someone who feels like they're forced to be there every day. So
hmm
like I feel like this is just as important as the other questions that you're answering. Because they want to know who you are as a person as well. And you show that by the way you answer these questions.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Um, so I think those are all the questions that we have, at least for this portion. Next time we'll talk about technical questions, probably more project related. And then, but if you have any questions that you want us answered, maybe in the behavioral portion, reach out. And I need to start doing submitted questions because I keep forgetting to do that. So we don't have any submitted questions this time. Um, yeah. Vanessa, do you have anything else to add before we close out?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, cool. So, as always, feel free to visit our website, follow us on social media. Stay tuned for our next episode. All of our episodes will be uploaded on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And if you have any questions, any suggestions, any guest recommendations, feel free to email us or DM us on our Instagram at Liera Twins. But that's it.
Thank you.
All
Bye.
right, goodbye.